museums as places for learning and enjoyment. That's why we're here, really. And we've asked this question for the past 2 days: why would a blind person want to visit an art museum? What's there to do there? As the educator at the Metropolitan Museum, responsible for programs and accessibility for disabled visitors, and as a partially sighted person myself, I get asked that question quite frequently. I'd like to address this question, or the question briefly, before I discuss the principles guiding programming at the Met for visually impaired people, and then I'll also discuss some of the pedagogical strategies that have contributed to successful programming. See, this is the Metropolitan Museum of Art from above. The museum is in Manhattan, on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, located in Central Park, another museum in a park, and surrounded in this image by the colorful foliage of autumn, and on the other side by the concrete jungle of New York City. So let's begin by considering the value of museums, of places like this huge edifice of the Met, as destination spaces. In her book, The Social Work of the Museum, Lois Silverman describes the multiple roles of museum galleries, replete with culturally significant artifacts. She says, as people engage with objects and each other, museums become containers and catalysts for personal growth, relationship building, social change, and healing. End of quote. So museums can be magical places, we all know this. Places of discovery, offering access to new ideas and to previously unknown objects as well. However, this transformative experience can be tempered by more mundane challenges and distractions for visitors with and without disabilities, especially in very large, very popular museums. And here we have an image of a very crowded exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art from a few years ago of designs by the fashion designer Alexander McQueen. Crowds, lines, poor acoustics, tired feet, lack of seating, orientation and navigation difficulties, all these can contribute to a less than ideal museum experience. Add to these mobility challenges, the lack of expectation that art will be accessible, and the prospect of being stared at or even yelled at while looking closely at or touching a work of art, and you might indeed wonder why a blind person would want to partake in this public and communal encounter with art. Our research findings concur with the case studies that we've been hearing. Reflections in interviews and surveys reveal that there are deep connections to the physical museum space, and that engaging with works of art in that space is very important. For example, one visually impaired visitor who is an avid museum goer said, and I quote, "I found that looking at art online and in books is interesting, but it's not very exciting. It's so exhilarating being in the museum environment amongst the works of art. I'm like a child in a toy store, feeling so thrilled and excited to be there. The colors in the actual works of art are so vibrant and buoyant when viewed in a museum gallery setting. Nothing can compare to that experience." She continues, "I love hearing people around me talk about the artwork. Also, having a tour guide describe the works of art helps me to make the art come alive. It enables me to make sense of shapes and colors that might otherwise be something my eyes couldn't discern. My spirits get so uplifted when I'm in a museum setting. I feel chills going up my spine when surrounded by famous works of art. This feeling lasts for hours after leaving the museum. Isn't that amazing and wonderful? End quote. And here on the screen, I show an image of visitors standing in front of a display, an exhibition, grouped together, sort of huddled together, listening to a description. So this same visitor reflected on her experience in another museum that lacked the authenticity of the gallery experience. She said, many years ago, another museum, I won't name it here, used to have tours for blind visitors in a conference room to view replicas. I told the staff that this was very boring and that the colors in the pieces didn't resemble the colors in the actual paintings. Thankfully, the museum stopped doing tours in this manner. End of her quote. Another visually impaired visitor said, nothing can compare to touching works of art in galleries. It's a privilege and a thrill that I'll always treasure. And here is an image of a man who is blind touching a small marble sculpture, or a life-size marble sculpture of a Maltese dog in our English period rooms. Despite the availability of images and information in print and online, the experience of original works of art, whether touchable or not, has lost none of its mystique. Indeed, the museum environment seems only to enhance the mysterious auratic qualities attached to the original. Ultimately, it seems the physical presence of the object is sufficiently powerful to make it worth overcoming the many barriers people face as they reach and navigate through the museum space. So now let's turn to the design of museum experiences. A universal design approach to galleries, and we heard about this from the Darwin Museum case study yesterday. A universal design approach to whether it's galleries or buildings, program spaces, services, extends beyond mere accessibility. This conceptual framework emphasizes the need to create products, environments, and educational opportunities with all potential users in mind. Universal design constitutes a different way of thinking about ability and individual preference, anticipating human diversity, and redefining variation in ability as ordinary, not special, something that affects everyone at some time in life. It's really expanding the spectrum of what we think of it as normal. It reflects a social model of disability, identifying the problem, if you will, as a design challenge. That's the problem, not as a flaw in any individual visitor. So I'd like to share with you now my sort of adaptation of the principles of universal design, which were originally developed with architecture and product design in mind to the learning environment. So some key features of a universally designed museum program. Programs are inclusive. They're open and welcome to all visitors, but also tailored where needed to meet particular needs and preferences. Choices are offered so that visitors can decide what kind of experience they want. Teaching methods take into account the diverse needs of the many audiences of the museum. Educators are flexible in their use of teaching strategies and in their structure and design of programs. They can think on their feet and adapt as needed. Programs incorporate multimodal or multisensory approaches to learning. Advances in cognitive psychology and neuroscience have helped us to understand how the senses in combination contribute to our perception and learning. Multisensory learning is something that I'll talk more about later, something that is a big emphasis for us in programming for all audiences at the Met. Program design and delivery challenges assumptions and expectations about what disabled people might want to do or be able to do in a museum, and also about the sort of challenges the assumptions that disabled people themselves might have about what might be possible in a museum setting. Museums collaborate with one another, partner with one another and with their audiences. They take an active role in the community and reflect their communities. The museum is in dialogue with its audiences constantly. And interpretation connects collections and audiences. So now I'll describe some of the Met's programs for visually impaired visitors, highlighting how universal design principles have been applied and some of the pedagogical and logistical strategies that contribute to the program's successes. And here I have a few images of different programs for various audiences in which people are engaging in art making. There's a tour in sign language happening for a school group in one image, a touch tour of Egyptian sculpture in the galleries, a group of kids participating in a tour who are moving their bodies to help them understand a work of art. To meet the widely varying needs and preferences of visually impaired people of all ages, we've developed a constantly evolving suite of programs. They're both scheduled, happening on a calendar on a regular basis, and by request programs for individuals and for groups, both in the museum space and at spaces outside of the museum. Just to go through some of that sort of suite of programs, we have a touch collection of objects that are part of the collection, also objects that are not part of the museum's collection, as well as handling materials and artist materials. That collection was established in the 1970s. We have what we call verbal imaging tours, which are descriptive tours by request for individuals or for groups. We have touch tours in the galleries of original works of art. We also use tactile pictures sometimes. They're not for everyone, but sometimes. And there were a couple of samples on the table about later of tactile pictures and tactile books. Multisensory activities, a little more about that later, but in addition to touch, activities as part of tours or other experiences in the museum that engage not just the tactile sense, but also our spatial and kinesthetic experience, the sense of smell, the sense of taste, hearing as well. We have monthly Picture This workshops that offer a range of different types of experiences of the permanent collections and special exhibitions for people with visual impairments. We have a drawing class called Seeing Through Drawing. We'll talk more about that later. We have an annual concert. This coming spring, 2016, will be the 20th annual Lighthouse at the Met concert. Lighthouse is an organization of and for visually impaired people in New York, and they have a music school. So musicians and singers who are visually impaired perform at the Met. A whole concert inspired by works of art. And this year we also had accompanying readings from the students, who are kids and adults, about their experience of color through different senses. And that concert was also accompanied by a scratch and sniff handout. So we had a Givaudan scent and fragrance and flavor company. They designed scents specifically for the concert. People could smell while they were listening to the music. We also have started recently something called pop-up sensory experiments, which are for all audiences in the galleries, and I'll talk a bit more about those in a moment. And here some images from a few of those different programs. For example, on the top right, we have people picture this workshop exploring some wooden objects, a box, there's a table in the back there somewhere. We had a conservator from the museum talking about the role of touch in her job. Touch is something we're often forbidden to do in museums, but in fact it's an important part of the work of many people in museums, curators, conservators. So she was talking about how she uses touch to do her job, and we had a chance to touch some of the wood objects that she was currently working on. On the bottom right, we have a woman touching a small sculpture, bronze sculpture from the Touch collection. In the middle, we have an image of a high school student who is visually impaired, taking a picture of from very close up of a sculpture, an Egyptian sculpture of Sakhmet, which is a sculpture you can touch. As he's participating in a photography course. We have someone drawing, we'll talk more about that later, and people touching another Egyptian piece in the galleries. We talked a lot about the importance of touch in the last couple of days, and there are many opportunities to touch original works of art in programs, different types of programs at the Met, both in the galleries and in the classroom. As well as things like artist materials shown here, a child touching an artist's palette, and some other handling materials we use to kind of help explain process here. We also use tactile graphics, as I mentioned, and tactile books, of which there are examples that you can touch over on the side. I like this quote about touch as a kind of grounding sense. Touch has a unique role in providing us with the experience of being present in the world. And I think that's a really important sentiment to keep in mind. We always accompany tactile experiences with description and discussion to help guide the visitor and to help build understanding of what is being touched, how it was made, and the discussion helps to contextualize the object and encourages interpretation and personal reflection and meaning making as well. We do a lot of training for educators and guides, and one thing we talk a lot about is the importance of understanding and acknowledging and teaching the difference between touch and vision. One is not a replacement for the other. Each sense has its own strengths and weaknesses, so we talk about the different types of information that each sense affords, with vision being better at information about spatial information, overall shape and form, whereas touch is better at revealing substance, texture, weight, temperature of an object. Touch is immediate, touch is active, touch is sequential, and all of those are those qualities are very different from vision. We also talk a lot about creating meaningful tactile experiences, not just giving somebody to touch and letting it go into a group without talking about it. We spend a lot of time guiding people in looking, so why not do that with touch as well? We can use touch very deliberately to explain materials and processes, and we've heard some great examples of that already yesterday. As a way of focusing attention and providing information in multiple formats, offering a concrete experience that with that immediate physical contact, which is going to be beneficial to many people, not just those who are blind. We can use touch to help isolate or abstract certain aspects of an object that we want to focus on, or offer a different kind of aesthetic experience, a tactile aesthetic experience, or as a prompt for art making as well. So there are lots of different ways. And this is just a slide, an example from the kinds of conversations we might have in training. where we're asking people to think about their tours, to think about what points they want to make, what qualities do they want to emphasize, what questions do they want to ask about works of art, and to think about what handling opportunities might provide support to help people discover the object, not just to have gratuitous handling opportunities that can actually be distracting. But touch is only one of many modalities. There's so many more possibilities. Although the art museum experience is a highly visual one for most visitors, it's also unavoidably multisensory, whether or not we're aware of these other sensory stimuli. Before encountering works of art at the Met and throughout any visit, the senses are assailed by multifarious sights, sounds, smells, textures, temperatures, even tastes. The visitor enters the museum from Fifth Avenue, surrounded by the wafting, mingled scents of hot dogs and pretzels from food carts on the plaza. In the great hall, olfaction shifts to the sweet smell of flowers from the 5 floral arrangements around the space. The large open space has high ceiling, marble floors, stone walls. It creates an echoing acoustic that magnifies the sound of milling visitors speaking dozens of languages. And this is just the start of the real-world context for viewing art. Given this really, this reality of challenges, but also one that's replete with opportunities for engagement, why not utilize all these sensations to our advantage, attend to them, encourage people, harness them, and extend this sensorium to our encounters with art. I mentioned before that the multisensory experiences are really drawing attention to the experience of the museum by our whole body, and all of our senses is an emphasis for us at the Met in programs for all audiences, especially in things like festivals and Friday evening events, what we call Met Fridays. For example, when our European paintings galleries reopened, we had a program kind of looking at Northern European and Southern European painting, but described as the wine route and the beer route. The beer route being Northern European and the wine route Southern European, with accompanying flights of beer and wine in the nearby balcony bar to help kind of get people into the Southern and Northern European groove. A recent Latin American, a focus on Latin America at a recent Friday evening event included various stations around the museum with different experiences, and one was a chocolatier offering tastings and describing the process of making chocolate and the various flavors. Another evening focused on portraits. In fact, just last Friday, we have an exhibition right now of the artist John Singer Sargent, his portraits of his friends and family. And there we had a mixologist who was creating custom cocktails tailored to individual personalities. The pop-up sensory experiments I mentioned earlier, one of them, for example, we invited visitors to explore cross-sensory description through wine tasting and art tasting, if you will. So thinking about describing something that's visual using the language of smell, or vice versa, for example. Well, with these, as with programs designed specifically for visually impaired audiences, we aim to capitalize on the sensorial environment with opportunities to connect with art through multiple modalities, and by focusing on these experiences for all visitors, we're also creating inclusive experiences as well. The slide here is just giving some ideas, things to keep in mind about multisensory experiences from our experience. So I've already mentioned one sense is not a substitute for the other. Each sense offers different types of information, offering sensory experiences can create overload. It's certainly something that needs to be considered very carefully. And what meaning? What are you trying to convey? What are you trying to elicit from visitors? Learning through the senses, other than vision, is essential for some people, and beneficial to many people. But as I mentioned, they can also be distracting. Here in the bottom right, we have an educator who's blowing on a conch shell, which is sort of it makes me smile because it's an oral experience. It's a very, very loud sound in a very big echoey gallery, which can help you understand. She's standing in front of a slit bone, a very large instrument, a hollowed-out tree trunk from the South Pacific Islands that was actually used. You hit it to communicate between islands, so the sound carries a long way. So the conch shell is a way of demonstrating how far sound can carry. But it can also be distracting if you're not part of the experience. Another example is using movement activities. So activities inviting movement to help people understand specific things like spatial relationships, emotions, body language, gesture, narratives, stories in art can be understood better sometimes through acting them out or striking a pose. Also artistic process, how artists move in order to make different works of art. And smell as well. We work quite a bit with several perfumers in different ways, using scent, talking about scent in historical contexts, creating opportunities for people to develop their own scents. I mentioned the Lighthouse concert example where scent was actually a part of the concert experience. Fragrance and scent, it's very interesting sense to work with. It's fragmentary, it's not continuous, so it's tricky to deliver in a gallery setting. It's very location specific. We get used to scents very quickly and stop noticing them too. It can be passive or it can be very active. And as you probably know, it's a sense that's directly connected to the limbic system involved in, goes directly to our emotional self. But it's also very strongly connected with motivation, with learning, and with memory. It's a strong trigger for memory, very personal connection, but also very culturally defined as well. It can be an aesthetic experience or the opposite. It can certainly affect our mood and behavior. There's a lot more to be explored there, and something that we're having fun exploring at the moment. So now I want to talk a little about a program that embodies really all of the universal design principles I mentioned, but I'll focus on just a few. Collaboration with audiences, reflecting our audiences, and challenging assumptions and expectations. So the class is seen through drawing. It has an emphasis on exploration of materials and process. And the audience is visually impaired adults and friends participate as well, and teens, adults and teens. I have a particular interest in experiencing art with different ways of experiencing art with visual impairment, especially through touch. I'm actually just completing a PhD in cognitive psychology right now, looking at sensory perception and mental imagery in people who are congenitally blind, especially. And I wanted to augment the museum's suite of options for this audience with an art making program some years ago. When we asked participants what kind of art they were interested in making, because we had requests, over here and there from people for art making experiences. People said that they were interested and that they were only ever offered sculpture or ceramics, three-dimensional types of art, and never the two-dimensional medium of drawing. So we like a challenge. So we started seeing through drawing. Each month, the teaching artists develop innovative projects that encourage experimentation and creative responses to works of art. And here they are drawing in the galleries using a very rough textured round and white Conti crayon. They're in an exhibition of Renaissance portraits, and they've been asked to create self-portraits with attributes that define them. So here, this young man who's actually deaf-blind is just drawn himself with a basketball on his head. In this example, people are touching the contours of their faces, and they've been asked to make double-blind contour drawings that they've been, we have some examples of them on the right. So they felt their profiles with one hand and drew with the other, and then continued to feel the other contours of their face. Each project utilizes non-traditional drawing materials such as stone-encrusted tar paper, sandpaper, torn paper, gesso, sand, string. This is an example of a project with as inspiration Franz Klein ink and cut paper works. They also use more typical drawing materials such as Conti crayon, pastel, pencil, charcoal, different papers. The tactility of the materials themselves and the kinesthetic and spatial experience of drawing, so drawing as a gesture, are central to the experience. It's really the focus of the experience. And here we have someone drawing as she touches a soapstone Inuit sculpture. And here the group warms up. They start out with a warm-up, really getting their bodies warmed up and getting used to the working large, the size of the paper. Various modes of perception inform the drawings. Touch, verbal description, sound, the sense of the body in space during the act of drawing, and in some cases partial vision. Imagination, multisensory mental imagery, and memory also play an important role in their creative process. And here are just a few examples. This was a drawing on the right made from in the galleries in front of this painting by William Merritt Chase on the left of a Spanish dancer. The description, the drawing on the right was made by someone who was completely without sight, who has very good spatial awareness, and the description was focusing on the movement of the dancer. So this drawing was made completely from description. Here's another example. This is a replica of a Degas dancer sculpture, and here on the right, a drawing capturing the motion, the spatial relationships, and a different Degas dancer, and another drawing kind of capturing the motion. And here a tiny sculpture that moves and makes sound, and some of the interpretations with line of that sculpture and the sound that it makes, especially. So So the artist's compelling and accomplished works and their observation about process reveal their intense interest, their commitment and ability, and also, I think, challenge perceptions about how people with limited or no vision can engage with and create works of visual art. And I want to offer just a few responses from interviews with artists in the class. Here, we see that participants want to draw in the galleries and in the classroom with original works of art using different modalities. I love, this is a quote, I love going into the galleries and having the art verbally described and then being there with drawing paper and drawing right there in the gallery. To be able to have work described and then draw it, to me, it's immeasurable. Participants create multisensory mental representations that contribute to their drawing. And here, a quote, I've developed little eyeballs in my fingers. There's a real connection between my hands and my brain. I can recognize things and get their description just from feeling. I can see it when I feel it and its description. Touch is more useful than vision to me. Participants have grown more comfortable with drawing, and they express that they have learned to be less critical and more relaxed. Here's a quote. I've also learned that there's no such thing as a mistake. So the class got me to loosen up, essentially, and not be so critical. Participants have changed their expectations about their drawings and what makes a good drawing. One said, I learned that it's good to be persistent even when everything doesn't always come out perfect. And another said, it's just opened me up to other ways of looking at art and other things. And it changes my expectations of my own work. You know, that it could be good without being photographic. And another said, what I've learned, I think, is to be more inside. You know, less worried about what it looks like than what it feels like. You know, more just hitting my emotions, more than trying to draw something that looks like something. And another said, I learned that I could make art. It's a physical thing. Someone showed me how to do it, and it's an emotional thing, too. The artists who teach the class have challenged themselves to create a curriculum that is experimental and innovative. And significantly, the first two educators who started the class, they are both they're both teaching artists who and practicing artists who teach in colleges around the city and teach drawing, and they have really used the approaches that they've developed in seeing through drawing with sighted students. They've transferred and really found a transferal of the freedom afforded by these new approaches to their teaching of sighted students. And this year we've mentored two visually impaired artists, one of whom is deaf-blind, who is recently, and they both now recently joined the Seeing Through Drawing team. They also teach in other contexts for various audiences with and without disabilities. Their perspectives and ideas are already enriching programs for blind and sighted audiences. And here we have an image of a tour that we did this summer in July for in celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We had a month-long celebration in the city and a number of programs at the Met. And here we did a tour called Dog Days of Summer, Dogs at Work and Play in Paintings and Sculpture in the museum. And it was a tour full of guide dogs and their humans. On the left, we have Emily, and then in the background in the black, Deborah, who are co-leading this Dog Days tour. You saw in a previous slide the Maltese dog with someone touching it, but Emily on the left is completely blind. She's an artist. She also has a hearing impairment, and she's leading the tour. But we were really inspired by her guide dog, London, who's in the background there. It's not a very good picture, and you'll notice maybe that there are a number of other dogs at this tour. We felt like London had been sitting around the office too much and needed a project. So London was actually billed as the leader of this tour. The dog was leading the tour for other dogs. So it was, I think, a playful experiment, and one that attracted new visitors, the people who hadn't been to the Met before, and who hadn't been to the museum for quite a while. So now with 4 visually impaired educators, 2 full-time and 2 freelance, and we also have 2 deaf ASL using educators, our team embodies the opposite of that deficit model that Jocelyn mentioned yesterday. The diverse perspectives and skills represented really are an asset to programming, really enriching content and ways of looking and ways of thinking for audiences. And museum staff have also learned from us and broadened their thinking about sensory encounters with art. So this has been a very interesting time for us. And if I can, I'd also like to just, there we are, going from one object to another with a few of the participants with eyes. I'd just like to play a moment of a video. This is another example where we want to have the voices of, and in this case, kids with disabilities included in everything that the museum does. So we just launched a couple of weeks ago something called McGinnis, which is an online resource. It's a website, and this is one of the videos. This is Nestor. Just watch a moment. Is there sound? This is a resource made for kids by kids. So is there more than one way to see a work of art? That's the question. And it's inspired by Animated Landscape by Miro in 1927. An image of it. People acting out the scene, even though it's abstract.
Hi, I'm Nestor. I'm 7 years old. This is the first time I've been to this museum. If you come, then you could do art. And I saw the water, and I also saw a fountain that if the water spills, it makes a mess. I saw the dragon. Dragons are really fake. I cannot announce in Spanish because my mom speaks Spanish. Si vos querés venir, vos puedes pintar para que los otros niños vengan al museo y vean. Thanks for watching. See you soon.
So Nestor was one of our kid reporters, and we're constantly adding different voices and perspectives to hashtag MetKids. So visit the website to see more. So finally, as educators, I think we have a big responsibility to make not only our programs, but the entire museum experience accessible to and truly inclusive of disabled people. This agenda is in fact a blueprint for how all museum experiences, including online experiences, should be conceived by providers, whether curators, educators, visitor services staff, staff in other departments. This concept of universal design has radical implications, I think, that can really enrich the museum experience for all, and also, and even more importantly, support museums in their important role as agents of social change. So good luck on your journeys, everyone. Thank you very much.